Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Big Ten Under 10 on the Hoosier Network. Adam Oppenheim with me, of course, is Graham Nash, and we have a great show on tap today. We will start with a stacked slate of basketball before going to the mat for wrestling and ice for hockey. The Big Ten had maybe their best matchups of the season this past week. Here are the scores. 11th ranked Wisconsin beat Illinois at home 95-74. However, unranked Oregon took down the Badgers in Madison in overtime 77-73. A 19-4 run for the Ducks in the last 6 minutes of regulation pushed the game to OT. 12th ranked Michigan got beat by rival 14th ranked Michigan State in Ann Arbor 75-62. The Spartans were rolling before that game as well as they took down number 13 Purdue at home 75-66. Number 20 ranked Maryland controlled the entire game against USC, winning 88-71. A non-conference battle at Madison Square Garden ended in a bloodbath as third-ranked Duke demolished unranked Illinois 110-67. Lastly, 13th ranked Purdue got upset in Bloomington by rival Indiana 73-58. The Hoosiers were fueled by a 28-3 second half run. And Graham is going to break down how Indiana came up with a massive win for their NCAA tournament resume. Graham?
Thanks so much, Adam. We're back in the film room breaking down the fireworks in Assembly Hall over the weekend. And that 28-3 Indiana run in the second half is exactly where we're going to begin analyzing this IU-Purdue basketball game. Our first play, it's at the beginning of the second half. Braden Smith takes it across the timeline. And this was a great set for the Boilers. Kaufman-Wren sets a screen. Fletcher Lawyer gets pretty open up top. Now, Lawyer is one of the best three-point shooters, not just on this Purdue team, but in the Big Ten. He probably could have taken this shot because Trey Galloway is pretty far behind. However, he passes up on it, gets it to Braden Smith. When Smith catches this ball, Anthony Leal is pretty far behind as well. The Indiana defense wasn't necessarily in their best position in this play, but they recovered. That was the big key for Indiana. Their defense did a great job of recovering in this second half. Smith gets a little head fake, drives, Leal gets blown by, but Miles Rice, he comes back in, sticks a hand out, somehow pokes this ball out, and it leads to a transition bucket for the Indiana offense. They said, both Woodson and the players in the press conference said that that defense all started with Miles Rice, said that he had one of his best games with the Cream and Crimson, and it came at a pretty good time against a very good Purdue team. The second play that we're going to look at is a few minutes later when Malik Renew picked apart the Purdue defense. Over Purdue's 3-game losing streak before they traveled to Bloomington, they really struggled with defending the interior. In this game, it was no different. Malik Renew gets this ball. He was phenomenal, 7 for 7 from the field with 15 points. And so Braden Smith, he comes and helps out immediately. Renew is double-teamed, but that leaves a wide-open Luke Goody in the corner. And Goody, like Fletcher Lawyer, is a phenomenal three-point shooter. So Renew sees him, gets it in the corner, Fletcher's late, and Goody drills a three. This was only one of Indiana's 4 made threes, though, Adam. They shot 21% from deep range. That doesn't necessarily matter, though, when you have 44 paint points. So here's our last play. We're going to look at one more of these plays where Purdue just struggles with their internal defense. Galloway has it at the logo. Ballo sets a screen. We've got Braden Smith a little far behind, but that's not really the issue here. The issue is Caleb first. He's got to decide, do I go back to Ballo? Do I help on Galloway? Now, Galloway, not necessarily one of the best shooters for Indiana, a great creator, but he probably could have left Galloway open on the perimeter and let him shoot it from long range without too much consequence. Instead, he cheats towards Galloway. Ballo gets in the lane, and Gallo does what he does best, and that is feeding his teammates. So, Adam, Indiana, they get this done, and regardless of the scenario, rivalry games are some of the best that we can watch, but this one was a little bit extra special. Purdue came back to Bloomington exactly 40 years after Bobby Knight famously threw his chair across the Assembly Hall floor in what was actually an IU loss to Purdue. 4 decades later, Mike Woodson sat on that chair in Assembly Hall, and the Hoosiers won by 15. Additionally, Woodson said in his presser that Purdue ended his collegiate career in 1980 in the Sweet 16, so this win is just a little bit sweeter, knowing that it could be his last time coaching against the Boilers. Adam?
Excellent job, Graham. Mike Woodson now finishes his career 4-4 against Matt Painter and the Boilermakers as a head coach. Graham, now you're back at the desk. Let's talk about another rivalry matchup. Michigan State took down Michigan. How did the Spartans take control of the second half?
Well, Michigan just went cold in the second half, frankly, Adam. It's kind of like we talked about on the women's side, Michigan State, UCLA. Michigan State might have lost that game a little bit more. Michigan might have lost this game a little bit more than the Spartans won it. Michigan, they did not score for a 3-minute span with under 8 minutes to go. And then they also went scoreless in the last 4 minutes of the game. So that's 7 minutes of not scoring. That's not going to win you a ball game against a really good Michigan State team. So the Spartans, they just ended on a 9-0 run. Their offense was there. It was strong, as it has been. Michigan shot 10% from beyond the arc in the second half. Michigan State shot over 50%.
Yeah, Michigan State's really not a good shooting team, but they were pretty good in the game against Michigan. Let's talk about an Oregon Ducks team that has won now 4 straight and are nearly a lock for the NCAA tournament. But how did they mount that giant comeback against the Badgers on the road?
Their defense was phenomenal. They forced 11 turnovers that turned into 17 points. That is a considerable number. And then on top of that, they held Wisconsin to under 45% shooting from the field in the second half. They also grabbed 4 more boards, so it was an all-around effort. They shot 44% from 3 in the second half. Everything was working for the Ducks, and they look like a pretty dangerous team headed towards March.
Indeed. A team that's now on the downswing, though, is the Illinois Fighting Illini. They've lost 3 straight and suffered their biggest defeat in program history against Duke. Is it time to hit the panic meter for the Fighting Illini?
Yeah, yes and no. I feel like I answer that way a lot on this show. Yes, because they've now kind of shown the committee that they can't really hang with some of the best teams in the country, Michigan, Michigan State, Duke. So if it comes down to selection time, that could hurt them. However, I add the no in there because there's still 3 games left in the regular season. They're facing 2 unranks and then a struggling Purdue team that's lost 4 in a row, and they still have the Big Ten tournament. They're currently 7th in the Big Ten standings, so there's time, but things are not looking good if it falls into the committee's hands.
So you're going to be in the middle.
In the middle. Yeah, exactly.
All right. We're going to switch over to the field. We are thrilled to bring you the second straight week of baseball talk here on Big Ten Under 10. Still, there is just one Big Ten team ranked in the top 25. That would be 23rd ranked Nebraska, who lost to Grand Canyon 3-1 earlier this week. They then struggled versus Louisiana Monroe, winning 6-1, but then losing games 2 and 3, 10-2 and 4-1. Other notable scores around the Big Ten: UNLV over Indiana in 10 innings, 13-12. Notre Dame over Iowa in 11 innings, 2-1. Ohio State with an upset over 12th ranked NC State, 8-3. Number 22 TCU took care of unranked Michigan in Ann Arbor, 10-4. Michigan did stay with the 5th-ranked Arkansas Razorbacks, but ended up losing 8-6 the final. Few more disappointing teams in the Big Ten included West Carolina beating Maryland 8-7, although the Terps did grab revenge, winning 35-12 later in that series. Rhode Island took down Oregon 12-11. Oregon won games 2 and 3, 1-0 in 11 innings, and then 19-12 in game 3. Graham, it's obviously still early in the season, but what series/games stood out to you in the past week?
Well, the Nebraska loss, but more than that, I'm going to say Ohio State's 8-3 upset over number 12 NC State. That win is the only win currently for Ohio State, but it's a good one. I mean, the Buckeyes, it's not like they won by 1 and barely squeaked by in overtime. They beat them by 5. They held NC State to 6 hits. That's a pretty good showing. I mean, it's so tough for these Midwestern schools to come out hot because they've been in the winter and they haven't been able to practice outside. So who knows if Ohio State has more in the tank? That's just what we're going to have to wait and see.
Now, I'm going to give you the ability to opt out of this next question if you want, but are there any teams that you think can make a run? I mean, super early in the season, but do you have any in mind?
Well, I opted out of your last question about Illinois, so I feel obliged to answer this one truthfully. I'm going to say Oregon or UCLA. It gets out of the Midwest area. These are 2 teams that are able to practice pretty much year-long, so that helps their case. But also, Oregon, they made the NCAA Super Regional last year. So I feel like they've got a really good foundation that they can build off of. Both teams have really only played a couple opponents. That's the big thing that I'm kind of stuck on. Oregon has played 2 people, that being Toledo and Rhode Island. UCLA has played a couple more, but still not enough, in my opinion. I think where we'll find out is the first week in March. Both of these teams will play USC. That'll be their first Big Ten action. I think that's where we'll learn.
Yeah, we're nearing the end of February and then into March. So let's go to the mat to talk about wrestling scores. It was a very quiet week in the Big Ten as a lot of teams were not in action. The Big Ten still has 9 teams ranked in the top 25. But first-ranked Penn State keeps winning. They won 50-3 versus American. Number 3, Iowa had its biggest win of the season, taking down second-ranked Oklahoma State, 21-16 in Carver Hawkeye. 11th-ranked Rutgers survives at home versus Penn, 18-13. Number 22, Indiana dominated on the road at Chattanooga, 40-4. Other unranked Big Ten teams included Maryland taking down Drexel, 23-13. Central Michigan over Michigan State at home, 22-12. And lastly, 4th-ranked Northern Iowa taking care of business in Madison, winning 28-12. We're now going to transition to the ice and talk about some Big Ten hockey. First-ranked Michigan State had tons of trouble with number 18 Penn State. First, they lost in a shootout in a 2-2 overtime game. Then Penn State took another victory, winning 3-2. The top 10 matchup in Minneapolis saw 5th-ranked Minnesota take on the number 7th-ranked Buckeyes. However, the home team dominated, winning both games 4-1 and 6-3. Upcoming games include 10th-ranked Michigan and 7th-ranked Ohio State, and also number 5 Minnesota against 18th-ranked Penn State. That is going to wrap up today's show. Huge thanks to our producer, Colin Dusek, and teleprompter Henry Thuss for making all of this possible. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at B1G_under10. And check back in later this week for our next episode of Big Ten Under 10.